Crawl back to me, mountain man ordered his weeping fat wife, his desperate need. Crawl back to me, Penelope. The command ripped through the sterile silence of the mountain laboratory like thunder. The floor gleamed white beneath the harsh fluorescent light, and the sound of machines pulsed like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Penelope, Penny Nightfall, froze mid-step, trembling. Her mind flickered in and out like a broken signal, memories half-formed, faces without names, emotions without context. All she saw now was the tall man before her, his shadow long and commanding across the tiled floor. Dr. Lucian Luke Darkmore, the reclusive neurosurgeon who lived on Shadow Ridge, looked more like a fallen angel than a doctor. His lab coat hung open, revealing a vest soaked with sweat, and his eyes, gray and hollow, held both exhaustion and desperation. "Please," he said again, voice breaking now, "come back to me." Penny stumbled backward, her body betraying her. Her head pounded. A migraine flared like lightning across her skull. Why are you yelling at me?" she whispered. "What did I do wrong?" Her tears blurred the world. Somewhere deep inside, something screamed that she knew him, that his voice used to sound softer, warmer, but now all she heard was a command, cold and frightening. She sank to her knees, sobbing. "If you're going to hurt me," she said, "please just make it quick. I can't take any more pain." Luke's face twisted, as though she had stabbed him. "No," he whispered, rushing forward, kneeling beside her, hands trembling near her temples. "That's not what I meant. God, Penny, I'm trying to save you. You're slipping away." His voice cracked, raw and broken. "If you don't crawl back to me, I'll lose you forever." Outside, thunder rolled across Shadow Ridge. Inside, the fight between love and science had just begun. The storm outside Shadow Ridge grew heavier by the hour, wrapping the isolated research facility in mist and rain. Lightning flashed across the mountain spine, briefly illuminating the towering structure, half hospital, half fortress, where Dr. Lucian Darkmore had exiled himself from the rest of the world. Inside, machines hummed softly. Monitors blinked green and red like distant constellations. And in the center of it all, Penny Nightfall sat quietly in a wheelchair, her fingers tracing the scar along her temple, the only physical mark left from the accident that had nearly killed her. She couldn't remember much, just flashes, a scream, broken glass, a man's hand reaching for hers through smoke, and then darkness. Lucian had found her body that night, her pulse weak, her brain swelling dangerously. In the operating room, he had fought for 18 hours without rest, patching torn tissue, reconnecting pathways no one else dared touch. When her family couldn't afford the long recovery, they made a desperate decision. They offered him a different kind of payment, her life. Now, Penny lived on the mountain under his care, under his name, as his wife. But every morning, she woke up feeling like a stranger. Lucian stood by the observation glass, studying her EEG readings. His reflection looked haunted streaks of gray in his dark hair, hollows under his eyes. Genius had made him feared. Isolation had made him dangerous. And love, the one emotion he couldn't control, had made him vulnerable. He turned toward her. "You're improving," he said softly. "Your temporal lobe shows new activity." She blinked, her voice unsteady. "Does that mean I'm getting better?" "It means," he said carefully, "you're coming back." She didn't know what that meant. Coming back from where? Lucian didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted her blanket and murmured, "When I told you to crawl back to me earlier, it wasn't a command, Penny. It was instinct, a plea. Her brows furrowed. Why would you plead with me? He hesitated, his eyes flicking away. Because the last time you collapsed like that, I lost you for 3 minutes. Your brain flatlined, you stopped breathing, and when you finally gasped again, he swallowed hard. You looked at me like I was a stranger. Penny's throat tightened. Maybe I was. Lightning flashed again, filling the room with white light. For a second, her reflection appeared beside his, in the glass, fragile, beside the formidable, a patient beside her savior, a wife beside her jailer. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, two broken souls stood on the edge of something neither could name, a fragile line between healing and heartbreak. Lucian reached out as if to touch her cheek, but stopped himself mid-air. Sleep, he said quietly. Tomorrow we'll try again. I won't lose you, not this time. And as he walked away, Penny whispered the question that would haunt him for months to come. Luke, what if I don't remember how to come back? He didn't turn around, but his voice was almost a whisper. Then I'll find you wherever your mind is hiding. Morning light spilled over the lab windows, soft and sterile. The storm had passed, but the world outside still looked bruised, the mountain glistening with dew, the trees bowed from the weight of rain. Inside, the quiet rhythm of machines filled the air, and Penny's day of rehabilitation began. Lucian adjusted her posture on the floor mats. We'll start simple, he said, his tone controlled, professional, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed the exhaustion underneath. Hand to floor, then knee. Focus on balance. Penny obeyed hesitantly, her movements slow and awkward. The floor was cold against her palms. Her breathing grew uneven. Every movement triggered a ripple of pain up her spine and through her skull. Why does it hurt? She whispered, voice breaking. Because the brain remembers pain before it remembers peace, Lucian said quietly. He crouched beside her, watching the faint twitch of muscles returning to life. Every second she held her balance felt like a miracle he dared not interrupt. After 10 minutes, she faltered and nearly collapsed. He caught her instantly, his hands firm on her shoulders. Easy, don't fight it. Their eyes met his gray, hers brown and glassy with tears. For a moment, the air thickened with something neither of them could name. Then she looked away, ashamed. You shouldn't have to touch me like this. I know I'm... Don't! His voice cut through her words, sharp and trembling. Don't ever apologize for being alive. Her breath hitched. He'd said it with such intensity that her chest ached. They sat there for a long time, her hands trembling in his. Days bled into weeks. The rehabilitation routine became their world. Slow walks through the therapy room, relearning words, identifying objects, reading simple sentences. Lucian never left her side. He corrected her posture. He reminded her to eat. He played classical music to stimulate memory, and sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she saw fragments of another life, a cafe, a voice calling her name, laughter echoing through sunlight. Then, always, a crash. One morning, she gasped mid-exercise and clutched her head. Penny? Lucian rushed forward. I remember, she murmured, shaking. There was a man standing in the street, yelling my name before the car hit. Lucian froze, his pulse hammered. What man? Her brow furrowed. He had your voice. He turned pale. That was me, he whispered. I was there. Her eyes widened. You were the one who pulled me out? Yes. His jaw tightened. And when I saw your heart stop, I swore I'd never let you go again. Tears welled in her eyes. "So when you said, 'Crawl back to me,'" he nodded slowly, "it wasn't just about your body. I was calling your mind home." She reached up, her fingertips grazing his cheek. "You sound like someone who's been alone too long." He didn't deny it. "I've spent half my life studying how the brain forgets," he said softly, "but nothing terrifies me more than being forgotten by you." The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. That night, she couldn't sleep. She wandered through the lab, tracing the cold metal of the machines, staring at her brain scans glowing on the monitors. Each image looked like a constellation, tiny sparks of thought and memory. In one of the reflection panels, she saw Lucian asleep at his desk, head bowed, a half-finished chart beside him. His hand still held a pen, his posture rigid, even in rest. She walked closer, her bare feet silent on the tile. For the first time, she realized that he wasn't just her doctor. He was a man drowning in guilt, clinging to science to keep his heart from breaking. She covered him gently with his coat and whispered, "I'm still here." The EEG machine beside her hummed softly, and on the screen, a single new spark of brain activity flickered to life. Weeks turned into months. The storm season faded, leaving behind the quiet hum of summer. The mountain no longer felt like a prison to Penny. It felt like a world in recovery, much like her. Lucian had moved her from the lab's sterile rehabilitation wing into the smaller living quarters, a place that looked more like a cabin than a clinic. Wooden walls replaced white tiles. A fireplace replaced fluorescent light. Outside, pine trees surrounded them, whispering in the wind. Here, everything slowed down. Every morning, Penny woke to the sound of Lucian grinding coffee beans. The aroma filled the air, warm and earthy. He didn't speak much, only small practical words. Breakfast, medication, stretch first. But beneath those words was a rhythm of care, unspoken yet steady. She began to help in small ways, setting the table, folding the sheets, taking short walks through the courtyard garden where he'd planted herbs for her therapy. Sometimes she forgot she was supposed to be recovering. "Why do you still treat me like I'm fragile?" she teased one morning, struggling to carry a basket of laundry. Lucian looked up from his papers. "Because you are." Penny laughed softly. "I was fragile. Now I'm healing." He hesitated, then smiled the faintest, rarest curve of his lips. "You sound like me when I talk about neurons." In the evenings, the world fell into golden light. Lucian would play the piano in the corner, the melody hesitant, searching as if he was trying to remember what joy sounded like. Penny would sit by the fire, sketching small things, leaves, jars, the outline of his hands. "Why are you drawing that?" he asked once, glancing up. "Because it's the only thing that doesn't shake," she said, smiling faintly. He studied her sketch, a delicate rendering of his hand on her shoulder, drawn from memory. "You remembered this?" "Yes," she said softly. "It's the first thing I remembered clearly." Something in him broke then. He turned away, blinking fast, pretending to focus on his music sheets. "That was the day I thought I'd lost you forever," he murmured. Life on the mountain became a quiet partnership. Lucian taught her how to mix herbal compounds for her therapy, how to monitor brain activity, how to write down her progress. Penny, in return, brought warmth into his precision, placing wildflowers in beakers, soft blankets over lab chairs, sunlight through open windows. Slowly, the house transformed. Where there had once been silence, now there was the sound of laughter. One night, As thunder rolled distantly beyond the peaks, Penny sat on the rug near the fire. She had been practicing writing again, her pen trembling as she formed the words. Lucian knelt beside her, helping her trace each letter. When she finished, she smiled proudly. "There! I wrote it without stopping." He looked at the paper. The words were shaky but clear. "I remember warmth." He stared for a long time, then whispered, "That's how I remember you." But beneath the soft light of recovery, something darker lingered. Some nights, Penny woke in terror, trembling, whispering words she didn't understand. "They're coming," she'd say. "The crash, it's happening again." Lucian would rush to her side, holding her tightly. "It's just the memory misfiring," he'd whisper. "You're safe. You're home." Each time she calmed down, his hands would stay around her longer than necessary, not to restrain, but to reassure. Not as a doctor, but as a man terrified of losing her again. One afternoon, while sorting through old files in his study, Penny found a folder marked NF, Case 021, her initials. Inside were medical charts, recovery notes, and a small photograph. It was her before the accident, smiling on a sunlit street, holding a cup of coffee. Next to her stood Lucian, younger, his hand hovering near hers, as if he'd been reaching but never dared to touch. She gasped. "You knew me before?" Lucian appeared in the doorway, pale. "Penny, why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice low, trembling. "Because if I did, you'd remember the night that almost killed you, and I can't bear to watch you break again." She stared at him, realization dawning the accident wasn't random. It was connected to both of them. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls. Inside, two hearts trembled, one remembering too much, the other afraid she'd remember at all. The storm returned that night, as if summoned by the truth. Rain lashed against the glass walls, wind howled through the eaves, and lightning fractured the sky over Shadow Ridge. Inside the cabin, Penny stood, trembling, the photograph still clutched in her hand. "You knew me," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "Before the accident, before any of this." Lucian's hands tightened around the back of a chair. "Yes." "For how long?" "2 years," he said finally. Each word weighted. "You were one of my patients at the city hospital. You volunteered for my research in neural mapping. You used to call me the man who lives in the wires." She shook her head, tears streaming. "And you let me forget that? You let me wake up here thinking I was some kind of property?" "I had to," he said, stepping closer. "Your mind was fractured, Penny. You didn't just lose memory, you lost emotional context. If I told you everything too soon, the trauma could have destroyed the pathways I spent months repairing." "But you married me," she said bitterly. "You said it was to save me. Was that another part of your experiment?" Lucian froze. For the first time, his eyes filled with visible pain. "No, the marriage wasn't science. It was desperation." "Desperation for what?" she demanded. "For you," he said simply. The words hit harder than thunder. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice trembling. "You don't remember, but the night of the crash, you were coming to tell me you were leaving. You said you couldn't live in my world of labs and equations. I tried to stop you. I chased your car in the rain, and when the truck came—" He stopped, the rest dying in his throat. Penny's knees gave way. She sank to the floor, clutching her head. Images flickered violently, headlights, a scream, a hand reaching through broken glass. His hand. "It was you," she gasped. "You pulled me out." He knelt beside her, tears mixing with the rain dripping from his hair. "Yes, and when your heart stopped in my arms, I swore that if you ever opened your eyes again, I'd give you a world where you'd never have to run from me or from yourself." Penny's breath trembled. "But you took away my choice." He nodded slowly, shame written across his face. "I know." Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. The machines in the lab behind the wall pulsed softly, reading her rising heart rate, the electric chaos of memory returning. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the door. Lucian's body went rigid. "Stay here," he whispered. He opened the door to find Dr. Mara Vex, his former research partner, her expression cold, precise. "Still hiding your prize patient?" she asked, stepping in uninvited. "The medical board is coming for you, Luke. Unauthorized experimentation, emotional coercion. You'll lose everything." Penny flinched at the words. Experimentation? Lucian spun toward Mara. "She's not an experiment. She's the proof that consciousness can heal, that love can literally rewire the brain." Mara's smirk was cruel. "Love? You abducted a woman and rewrote her memories." Penny's pulse raced. "That's not true," she whispered, uncertain now, eyes darting between them. "Tell her, Luke," Mara pressed. "Tell her about the cognitive bonding protocol. The one you tested on her before the accident, the one you kept secret from the board." Lucian's silence was the only confession she needed. Penny's voice cracked. "What did you do to me?" He reached for her, but she backed away, trembling. "Penny, please, the bonding wasn't control. It was meant to stabilize your neural function through emotional connection. I linked your recovery to my presence because your brain recognized my voice, my heartbeat, as safety. You're alive because of it." Her eyes filled with horror. "So that's why I panic when you're far away, why I dream about your voice even when I try not to." "Because you're connected to me," he said, desperate. "But it's not manipulation, it's dependence," she interrupted. "You made me need you." Lightning flashed again, turning his face ghostly pale. "Yes," he said softly, "but I didn't realize until too late that I needed you even more." Mara's voice sliced through the air. "The board will be here by morning. You have one night to say goodbye to your little experiment." She turned and left, slamming the door. The storm outside roared again. Inside, Penny and Lucian stared at each other, the scientist and the subject, the savior and the captive, bound not by wires or machines, but by a bond neither science nor reason could explain. Dawn came gray and violent over Shadow Ridge, dragging thunderclouds behind it. The storm hadn't stopped. It had simply changed shape. What had been rain now came, as men in black coats, the medical board, their cars crunching up the gravel path toward Lucian's sanctuary. Inside, Penny stood by the window, her reflection pale against the glass. Every heartbeat thudded in her skull, a physical echo of fear and betrayal. Lucian paced the floor, his lab coat gone, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man stripped of science, left only with regret. "They'll take me," he said flatly. "They'll shut this place down and declare you unstable, unfit to live without supervision." Penny turned sharply. "You mean they'll take me back to a hospital?" He nodded. "And erase everything I've done?" She shook her head, tears glistening. "Everything you've done," she whispered, "or everything we've become?" Lucian froze. He had no answer. The pounding came next, fists on the door, voices shouting his name. "Dr. Darkmore, by order of the board, You're under investigation for patient coercion and unethical treatment." He stepped toward the door, but Penny caught his arm. "If you go out there, they'll destroy you." He looked down at her trembling hands on his sleeve. "Then I'll let them. You deserve to be free." Her voice broke. "Free from what? From the man who gave me back my mind?" He cupped her face, thumbs brushing her tears. "From the man who took away your choice." The door burst open. 2 officials entered, flanked by Mara Vex. She looked triumphant. "It's over, Luke." "No," Penny said suddenly, stepping forward. "It's not." Every eye turned to her. "I know what he did," she continued, her voice shaking but firm. "He linked my recovery to him, but you call it manipulation, I call it connection. I felt his voice wake parts of me no machine could reach. I'm standing here, speaking, remembering, because he refused to let me die." Mara scoffed. "You're not capable of informed consent. He programmed your brain to defend him." Penny's gaze hardened. "If that were true, I'd be silent right now." She turned to Lucian, voice softening. "But I'm not, because what he built wasn't control, it was trust." The officials exchanged uneasy glances. Lucian stepped closer to her, his voice raw. "Penny, don't." She silenced him with a touch to his lips. "You told me once to crawl back to you. I thought it meant submission. Now I know it meant survival. You didn't force me to need you. You reminded me I was still worth saving." Outside, thunder cracked like applause. Lucian took her hand, facing the board. "Then whatever punishment you decide, I'll take it. Just leave her free." The lead investigator hesitated. "Free to do what?" Penny lifted her chin. "To prove that love is not a disease, it's the cure." Weeks later, Shadow Ridge stood silent beneath a sky of pale gold. The facility had been emptied. The machines were gone, the lights turned off, and the once bustling lab had become a hollow echo chamber of memories. Lucian Darkmoor's medical license was suspended. The world called him a fallen genius, reckless, unstable, dangerous. Yet, even in disgrace, he never left the mountain. He stayed, rebuilding the cabin with his bare hands, piece by piece, as if restoring both the home and the heart he had once broken. Down in the valley, Penny began a new chapter. The medical board had offered her a place in rehabilitation studies, hoping to learn from her recovery, but she refused to let herself be caged again. Instead, she opened a neural recovery center, a sanctuary for patients who had lost more than their memories, those who had lost their will to live. Every morning, she led therapy sessions that blended science and compassion, echoing Lucian's philosophy. Healing begins when the heart believes it can. And sometimes, when the fog lifted from the mountain, she could see a flicker of light from the ridge, a single lamp glowing through the mist. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, she climbed the trail once more. Lucian was there by the fire, sketching neurons in charcoal on the cabin wall. His hands were rougher now, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes, those eyes, still carried the same ache. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. She smiled. "You told me once to crawl back to you. I walked this time." He stared at her for a long, trembling second, then whispered, "Welcome home." Outside, thunder rolled softly, but this time the storm never came. Every scar tells a story not of weakness, but of survival. Penny and Lucian's journey wasn't about perfection or even redemption. It was about choosing to return again and again to the place where love began to heal what science couldn't. If you've ever felt broken or lost the memory of who you once were, remember this. You can always rebuild, even from the ruins. So tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Because somewhere, someone still believes that love can rewire even the darkest mind. And maybe that someone is you.